She stood in the middle of the grocery aisle, wearing a faded cardigan, scuffed flats, and carrying a purse so worn the straps looked ready to snap. And yet, under all that, she was a billionaire, one of the quiet ones, the kind who could buy the entire building but chose instead to hide inside a life that wasn't hers. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and how old are you? Because what you're about to hear, it'll make you question everything about love, loyalty, and the masks people wear. And let me ask you something. If you had more money than you could ever spend, how would you find someone who loved you, not your bank account? Her name was Eleanor Hayes. 63 years old, sharp-minded, elegant by nature, but tonight she looked like a woman who'd lost everything. She stood there gripping a can of soup like it was evidence in a trial. Because in her world, in her circles, every man who approached her saw dollar signs before they ever saw her soul. And she was tired. Tired of dinners where smiles felt rehearsed. Tired of men who suddenly became poets when they learned her net worth. So she decided to do something drastic, something almost reckless. She dressed as a poor, lonely retiree to search for a good senior man who saw her heart before her wealth. She didn't tell her assistant, her lawyers, her friends. She only grabbed an old wig, some thrift store clothes, and walked into a quiet neighborhood where nobody knew the name Hayes. She rented a small, creaky apartment and told the landlord her savings were tight, but she'd make it work. You should have seen his face. Kind, warm, the type who doesn't judge. And that alone made her remember what she was chasing. Sincerity. A week later, she found herself sitting on a park bench, feeding pigeons with stale bread she bought on sale. That's when she first saw him, Walter Grant. 70 years old, tall but a little stooped, with eyes so gentle she felt them before she met them. He sat down a respectful distance away, nodding politely. Eleanor noticed something different about him immediately. He didn't glance at her empty-looking purse. He didn't scan her shoes or watch to see what brand she wore. He just existed beside her like he wasn't trying to win anything. That's rare. You know that, right? And Eleanor felt it. This tiny spark of curiosity she hadn't felt in years. She asked how his day was. He chuckled, saying it was slow, that retirement didn't suit him as well as he hoped. He mentioned he used to fix clocks, real, old-fashioned ones. His hands weren't as steady now, he joked, but he still tried. His stories weren't grand, but they were full of soul, full of years lived honestly. She found herself wanting to know him more. Over the next few days, they kept crossing paths, at the park, at the grocery store, outside the coffee shop where she always ordered the cheapest item on the menu to maintain her disguise. Walter would smile every time and say something simple like, "Cold day, huh?" or "Bread's on sale inside." Nothing rehearsed, nothing calculated. One afternoon, they walked together for almost an hour, talking about childhood memories and mistakes and dreams they thought they were too old to chase. And Eleanor, she felt seen, not as a billionaire, not as someone valuable because of her assets. She felt like a woman, aging, hoping, wondering if love was still something she could touch. But the deeper she fell into this simple, peaceful world, the heavier her secret grew. She knew she couldn't hide forever. She knew that one day she'd have to tell Walter who she really was, and risk losing the only genuine connection she'd felt in decades. The moment that pushed everything forward happened on a rainy Thursday morning. Walter found her struggling with a heavy grocery bag, the handles digging into her palms. He hurried over, took the bag without asking, and said softly, "You shouldn't carry weight like this alone. It's not good for your hands." Her heart cracked just a little at his kindness. They ended up sitting at a small cafe, rain tapping against the window. Walter bought her tea, even though she insisted she could pay for herself, and she watched him count the bills carefully. He wasn't wealthy, that was obvious, but he spent what little he had to make her comfortable, and that meant more to her than any diamond she had ever been given. Then, just as she was warming her hands on the cup, he looked at her, really looked, and said, "Eleanor, can I ask you something? Please don't take it the wrong way." Her stomach tightened. "Of course," she said with a shaky smile. He hesitated, and she saw the conflict in his eyes. "I don't want to pry, but I've seen you around for weeks now. You're kind, gentle, but sometimes you seem scared, like you're carrying more than groceries, like there's something you're hiding." Her breath caught. He wasn't accusing her. He wasn't suspicious. He was concerned, and that terrified her more than anything. She bit the inside of her cheek, trying to calm the tremble in her voice. "Walter, there is something I need to tell you, and I don't know how you'll take it." He leaned closer, brows knitting with worry. "You can tell me anything, I promise." She opened her mouth, ready to confess everything, the money, the mansion, the hidden identity. But before a word came out, the cafe door opened, and a tall man in a suit stepped inside. Eleanor froze. It was her attorney's assistant, the one she told not to contact her unless it was an emergency. He spotted her immediately, and the look on his face said this was an emergency. He hurried to her table and whispered harshly, "Ms. Hayes, there's been a situation at the estate. You're needed immediately." Walter's eyes widened. "Ms. Hayes?" Eleanor felt the world tilt, the disguise collapsing piece by piece. And Walter looked at her like the woman he thought he knew had vanished right in front of him. Walter's face didn't harden, but it shifted, slowly, painfully, into something she feared even more: hurt confusion. Eleanor felt it stab right through her ribs. The rain outside suddenly sounded louder, like it was pressing in on the glass, waiting for her next move. Walter set his cup down gently, the slightest tremble in his hand. "Ms. Hayes," he repeated, his voice soft but wounded. "Is that you?" Eleanor swallowed, her throat tight and dry. She could have lied. She could have said the assistant was mistaken, but the disguise she'd carefully built had already cracked wide open, and she couldn't patch it. Not with Walter looking at her like that. Not with the truth hanging between them like a storm cloud ready to split open. She managed a whisper. "Walter, I'm so sorry. I never meant to involve you in any of this." He didn't snap at her. He didn't pull back or raise his voice. That almost made it worse. Instead, he blinked hard and asked, "Why would someone pretend to be poor? What would you gain from that?" His tone wasn't mocking. It was heartbreak trying to understand. The assistant urged her to leave immediately, but Eleanor lifted a hand, signaling him to wait by the door. She wasn't walking away from Walter without trying. She owed him more than a rushed explanation in a rain-soaked cafe. She leaned closer, her voice trembling. "I did it because I wanted someone to see me. Me, not my money, not the Hayes name. I've had men chase me my whole life for what I own, not who I am. I was tired. I was lonely. And you were the first person in years who didn't seem to want anything from me." Walter's eyes softened, but the confusion stayed. "But why not just tell me the truth? Why live an entirely different life?" She sighed, feeling every bit of her 63 years. "I was afraid. Afraid that if I showed you the real world I came from, you'd walk away. That you'd think I was playing with your life, your circumstances." He didn't respond right away, and that silence, it was a blade. He finally said, "Eleanor, I liked you because you were simple, gentle, and kind. Now I don't know what to feel. I need time." And then he stood up. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly. He walked out into the rain without an umbrella, disappearing into the gray street before she could muster the courage to stop him. Eleanor felt her breath break in her chest. Her assistant reminded her again that they had to leave, and this time she didn't resist. She followed him out, tears warming her cheeks despite the cold. Back at her estate, chaos unfolded around her. Security issues, financial alerts, emergency meetings. But through all of it, her mind stayed stuck on Walter walking away, his shoulders hunched, not from the rain, but from disappointment. Days passed without a single sign from him. She visited the park twice, then 3 times. He wasn't there. She wandered near his neighborhood but couldn't bring herself to knock on his door. How could she, when she wasn't sure she deserved to. One evening, she stood in her massive living room, surrounded by marble, chandeliers, priceless art, and felt nothing but emptiness. All the money in the world, and yet she'd never felt farther from someone she cared about. She sat down with her old cardigan, the one she wore during her disguise, holding it like a memory she wasn't ready to let go of. "If you were in her place," she whispered inside her mind, "would you chase him or let him go with dignity? Even you watching, what would you do if the person you cared about discovered you'd been living behind a mask?" The next morning, she decided to take a chance. She changed into a simple blouse and slacks. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy. She drove to Walter's neighborhood alone, no security, no staff. Her hands trembled as she climbed his porch steps, and she could feel her pulse in her neck. She knocked once, no answer. She knocked again, softer. The door opened slowly. Walter stood there wearing an old sweater and holding a book like he'd been interrupted mid-sentence. His surprise was genuine. His hesitation was painful. "Eleanor, why are you here?" She took a shaky breath. "Because I don't want you to hear about my life from tabloids or attorneys or rumors. I want you to hear it from me, all of it. And if after that you still want me to leave, I'll walk away." He didn't invite her in. Not yet, but he didn't close the door either. "Talk," he said gently, and so she did. For nearly an hour, she stood on his porch telling him everything, how she built her wealth, how many people used her over the years, how loneliness wrapped around her no matter how many zeros were in her bank account. She told him about the disguise, the old apartment, the thrift store clothes, and how meeting him was the first time she felt human again. When she finished, her voice broke. "I didn't want to deceive you. I wanted to know what it felt like to be liked for the woman I am, not the world I own." Walter stepped outside and closed the door behind him, leaning against the railing. Rain clouds were gathering again, painting the sky silver. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Eleanor, I'm not angry that you're wealthy. I'm hurt because I thought we were building something honest. I don't have much, but my honesty? That's the only thing I can give someone." Her eyes filled instantly. "I know. And I treasure that more than anything I've ever bought." He stayed quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, steady. "Maybe we can start over, but this time, no disguises, no secrets, just two people trying to understand each other." Eleanor felt something inside her unclench, a slow, steady relief rising through her chest. She nodded, her lips trembling into a smile. "I'd like that more than you know." Walter squeezed her hand gently. "Then let's try, one step at a time." Weeks passed, and their relationship grew with honest roots. He never asked for money. She never flaunted it. They built moments instead, walks, stories, laughter, and vulnerability. And Eleanor learned that love felt different when it bloomed from truth, not performance. And when Walter finally asked her to share a dinner with him, a real date, Eleanor, not a rainy cafe rescue, she felt 20 years younger. By the time he slipped a simple, elegant ring onto her finger months later, Eleanor realized something she wished she'd known years earlier. Wealth can build walls, but love builds doors. If this story touched you, please like the video, drop a comment, share it with someone who believes love can still surprise us, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps these stories continue to reach people who need them.